seems to me that the whole, not just the G7, but really emanating from the White House, the Biden commitment to alliances and so on, that traditional approach has bolstered the government's forward-leaning approach when it comes to China, whereas, say, Donald Trump, as we know, was and is so transactional on China. Biden still strong when it comes to that issue, but he's doing it through the traditional alliance structure, which actually helps our government, firms it up.
Well, absolutely, and that commitment, and you heard it in Morrison's speech, to repair and renovate multilateral institutions. The only one he's not talking about is the United Nations, but that's not really an active player in Asian security issues. But the willingness to use the G7, to use the G20, I mean, the fact that Biden is doing this overseas trip at this point in his presidency and making the commitment to go to the UK, to Cornwall of all places, to have this meeting. So I think that does help Australia in what it's trying to do. Prime Minister Morrison yesterday was at lengths to endorse Biden's message to look into the origins of the coronavirus in Wuhan, which is something that Australia's been calling for some time. So we're seeing a lot of alignment between the two leaders. And I think the vision that Prime Minister Morrison laid out yesterday positions Australia as quite an active international player. Where we can have influence, we're looking to advance an agenda, particularly on things like the WTO.
When we spoke to Andrea earlier, who said this is one of the most important overseas commitments for the Prime Minister, it's hard to disagree with. I mean, in fact, it's his first face-to-face. And those face-to-face meetings are important. I know we've done a lot by Zoom and Skype and so on, but when you talk about international summits, it's where leaders can actually build up some sort of rapport, and that we can't discount the importance of that.
I think it's extraordinarily important. I mean, it's those pull-aside conversations, the marginal remarks, the non-scripted interactions between leaders where you can actually get the most fruitful progression of ideas. And that's very hard to do over Zoom where you're in a formal setting. So I think it's critical that we're doing this face-to-face. Great that the Prime Minister's stopping off in Singapore on the way over as well, another critical, comprehensive strategic partner for Australia. And the fact that we're at the G7 meeting is not to be taken for granted. We're one of a small handful of countries that have been invited to attend that meeting for a number of times now.
It's interesting, we talk about the constructive things that can be done, and also those pull-aside conversations is a way to, help deal with problems. Like that has not been there for the Prime Minister to try and, say, have a discussion with the Chinese leadership in the last couple of years in an informal basis. There hasn't been that mechanism, and so we've simply been in the deep freeze and continue to be so. And
we're seeing that in the comments from China this morning in relation to our reciprocal access agreement finalised with Japan overnight. We're being shouted at from the sort of the pulpit of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we're communicating back through the media indirectly. That direct contact isn't there. But we're not the only country that's gone through this. Norway went through this. The UK has gone through this. And this won't be the last time that Australia gets frozen out by China either. One of the things that we're expecting out of this trip is a free trade agreement, possibly, likely, with the UK. One of their big forays post-Brexit. The other big foray is on climate change, though. And Boris Johnson wants that climate change summit to be a success. He'll be putting a bit of heat on, excuse the pun, on his mate from down under when they meet at number 10 Downing Street. Yeah, he will. And, the Prime Minister, the message on climate in his speech yesterday, and I think it's important to note it was delivered in Perth, so perhaps not the place to make a speech about your commitment to renewable energy, but he was at pains to point out the line he's walking between wanting to make commitments to climate change issues but needing to be conscious of the difficult politics of that in Australia, which are very different to the politics of climate in the UK. He's got to make some movement on this before the Glasgow meeting, before the COP26 meeting. He's signalled that he'll do that, but he hasn't yet signalled what that would look like. James Brown, as always, great to see you. Thanks.